Generation Z?
Well, what a challenging question that is.
I love the Generation Z because they actually keep challenging you pretty often, but they also make sure that you doubt yourself pretty often.
There's no doubt that the students that we teach now behave in a way that's quite different than the students that I've taught previously or earlier in my career.
I think the biggest challenge that you will encounter with Generation Z is when they keep challenging you in the class. If you actually get your facts right, then you're okay. So prepping becomes an extremely important case. If you're not really prepared for the class, you might actually be challenged because they actually have access to every single thing.
But my experience is that they respond very well if you take the time to build up an interest within a topic.
Oh, active learning. I love this topic. Active learning is a cornerstone of contemporary teaching. The more you work, the more you learn.
Classical lectures tend to not play well into their need for sort of constant stimulation.
Some of these things work extremely well, but it also depends on how tired the students are. So if you actually want to make sure that active learning is extremely energetic in the classroom and everything else, you might need to be very, very careful about it based on how enthusiastic the students are.
What I have done is to develop some active learning exercises, compulsory assignments in the shape of written assignments, in the shape of pitches, in the shape of simulations. And all of those written assignments actually constitute one of the essential parts of my teaching. It really works.
Relevance. So relevance is another interesting topic. So I would just say, like anything, irrespective of whether you've taught the courses 20 times, 30 times, 40 times, or 100 times, it doesn't really matter, because even if you're teaching a theoretical course, the most important thing is if your theories actually hold ground even today. And more specifically, you might want to prep your classes in such a way that you might want to engage with the social dynamics that are currently happening in the world and to actually see and criticize your own theoretical grounding.
My experience is that students crave a relevance in any topic that we teach.
That it is connected to, for example, practical, societal, or in my case, political problems. And one way to do this is to connect theory with latest developments. What is happening in our worlds, in our society, that is relevant?
I try to create exercises that they do outside of class before teaching that has the formal focus. And then when I have time with the students, I focus on how do these concepts relate to a business context.
Next, student curiosity. I love this topic. I love this topic because I think that without student curiosity, there is no learning process.
I usually say that this is our biggest responsibility.
The students are pretty tired sometimes because they end up doing a lot of things before they actually get to the class. They actually work, they do internships, they actually do volunteering service, they actually go out, party, everything else, right? So getting students really curious about something that you're extremely passionate about is a bit of a challenge.
My advice is that whenever we have to teach a topic, we don't think so much about, oh, what am I going to teach? Which articles am I going to use? Which concepts, which methods, which theories am I going to use? Our first question should be, how can I make my students curious? Because if our students are not curious, they will not be open to learning. So it is a little bit like the golden gate of learning.
I personally believe the students' curiosity could actually be brought in through active learning mechanisms and through discussing real-world case studies.
You could say that it's their own responsibility to be curious, but I don't think that curiosity is naturally nurtured, for example, by classical lecturing. I think that there are so many other things that they are exposed to.
But I would just say, yes, it is the responsibility of the students as well, but the responsibility also lies with the teacher. You can actually make a really interesting subject extremely boring, and you can actually make an extremely boring subject really interesting as well.
Artificial intelligence.
We are ushering into a world of artificial intelligence, and even if you like it or not, you'll have to deal with artificial intelligence in your everyday life. You just can't say the students can't use this anymore.
I think we should use it instrumentally to accomplish our learning and teaching objectives.
Responsibly engaging with AI will not only help students just in the classroom, but it can actually go ahead and help students in the job search, because most businesses currently end up using AI in some form or the other.
We should definitely embrace it. We should use it in all the areas where it can help to heighten the competencies of our graduates. Also, if we avoid it, then we won't be educating for the real world that the students will enter.
Preparation.
This is a topic that I struggle quite a bit with.
We cannot assume that students will come prepared to class.
You can't be strict and throw students away from the classroom just because you're not prepared. The idea is to engage with them slowly and assertively.
Different students learn in different ways, and preparation plays a different role for different types of students. And some students just do not see a value in preparing before class.
It's a back and forth mechanism. It's not like you tell them to do something and then they're definitely going to do it. It's a back and forth mechanism. It will work, but it's a continuous engagement process with the students, telling them this is exactly what I want you to be prepared for the class, and this is how you can actually engage with the class, and these are the advantages that you can actually receive when you're prepared for the class.
And what I do is actually to make compulsory exercises. So they are part of they are an examination, and those compulsory exercises, in my case, they ensure not only active learning, but also they ensure that students will come prepared to class.
So I typically use a note structure for my classes. And when I introduce them in my first lecture, I say, it is my expectation that as a minimum you have read this before you come to the lecture. If you have read this, you will at least on the surface be able to know what topics we're talking about, and also some central conclusions about where we are heading. And if you don't read them, it'll be very difficult to follow along in class.
I think it needs to be at the right level. Sometimes we end up doing too much of readings. For example, let's say, like, in sense, anything more than 2 to 3 readings for a bachelor's level course is actually an overthrust. I used to do this, and I've actually burnt my fingers by doing this, because the only reason is sometimes students don't turn up in the class because you challenge them in the class if they're not prepared. And that actually brings in a lot of fear into their minds. So the idea is the preparation should also happen where we need to tell them and teach them how to prepare for the class as well.
Simulations and real-world scenarios.
Simulations are a great tool.
I would just say inclusive education is a lot more important, and not to have just one single flat way of engaging with students, but to actually know and scale it up and down. And
perhaps the best way is to start with micro simulations. Think of a simulation that can last, for example, for half an hour or 1 hour, and then frame your teaching in accordance to that micro simulation.
I would tend to think it's neat to have. I think for a while it's been sort of, well, those are nice tools if we have the time for them or if we have the money for them.
In my case, I use simulations of, let's imagine that you are a political party or that you want to create a new party. How would you do it? You are the communication manager, you are the political leader, you are the political campaigner, and then you have different roles assigned to the students.
In light of the way that the generation we have now is learning, and sort of their demands for always being able to see relevance in what we do, I think the best way of talking into that and ensuring that they actually obtain the competencies or build up the competencies that we wish for them to have is by actually integrating both simulations and real-world scenarios into our courses.
I typically tell them what the role play is all about, and then I start engaging them in the role play. But then I've also found those role plays just after lunch was really a bad idea.
Simulations worked marvels, work miracles, so go for it. Don't be afraid.